That's Nick.
That's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Thanksgiving, the eighth film directed by Eli Roth, which TriStar Pictures is releasing November 17th, 2023.
Can you name some Eli Roth films you like?
I liked Cabin Fever and The House with a Clock in Its Walls. His Death Wish remake with Bruce Willis leaves a lot to be desired, but I don't know that it deserved the ravaging that it got. He, of course, directed the two Hostel films, which I'm not crazy about, but...
So, Thanksgiving. After a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the infamous holiday. What's your pull quote?
That description makes it sound a lot more intelligent than the film is, but
yes.
Like a lot more meaningful with some subtext. But my pull quote is: a formulaic slasher flick which wastes the opportunity to viciously satirize the toxic ills of consumerism. Eli Roth's Thanksgiving is like a great big undercooked turkey, which is only seasoned with murder.
Oh, mine is: for those interested in a slapsticky slasher, Thanksgiving will satisfy. I thought this movie was fine. I think in the realm of like slasher films, I enjoyed this more than a lot of other ones that are popular, like the last Scream movie.
Oh, for sure. At least because there's a semblance of like fresh characters without a whole lot of stupid baggage that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, this does feel more substantial than your average, like, oh, there are people being plucked off one by one until we find out who it is and they're dispatched. There are some points.
It is like that, yeah.
Yeah, I really like the opening.
The opening is the best part of the film, and but again, I think it could have gone harder.
The basic story is that there is a riot on Black Friday at a store called Price Mart,
which is
the owner of the store lives in, like, is a member of the community, and his daughter Jessica is the lead of the movie. So during this Black Friday riot, several people die. We can talk about it. So then we flash forward a year and we see that the man, the family responsible, or the people who run Price Mart, they are never held accountable for the deaths. And then we see that there's a person wearing like a pilgrim mask and outfit killing everyone who was involved in the riot. So the daughter Jessica and all her friends, they were able to get into the store before the doors opened. There's a security guard and some other people, the owner of the store, who the killer is trying to get. And the killer goes through them one by one. Everything culminates in a Thanksgiving dinner where the killer has all of the victims at the table, and the killer is live streaming what they're doing. And then, of course, we find out who the killer is. That person is dealt with. The end. I'll save who the killer is in a minute, but I thought maybe I should start with the kills, since that'll probably tell the story, and people seem to like that. So at the Black Friday riot, the issue is that there are all these people, which is the scariest part of the movie, because you see all these people just being like, there's no humanity, no civility. They just want to get in because the first 100 customers get a free waffle iron, which I thought was funny. And they're just like a mad riot. They want to get in, and they see these kids, Jessica and her friends, get in. So they kind of like push, like surge, and they break down the doors. So a security guard gets trampled. So that's the first death. Then one of the customers trying to break in, because the glass broke, like a piece of glass stabs someone in the neck, and that person dies while they're trying to grab a waffle iron. And then we see someone take the waffle iron from their dead hands. I thought the most shocking kill is, so the manager of the store is named Mitch. And Mitch gets called in on Thanksgiving to work because some other person can't show up. And Mitch is told that if you don't show up, you're fired.
Does that plot point make sense? Wouldn't he already have expected to work on Thanksgiving as the manager of the store?
I also thought that yeah, how did you not think that you would not? Because also the man who owns the store seems like a dick. So I don't know how you thought you weren't going to work on Thanksgiving. But anyway, Mitch is married to Gina Gershon,
Mm.
who looks lovely.
Oh yeah, she looks great.
I actually thought she looked too good to be.
As soon as Patrick Dempsey, as the sheriff, shows up to her Thanksgiving dinner with the store owner at their house, and they're trying to make it look like a working class family's home, it's like Gina Gershon is not.
No. But I like seeing her. She shows up to Price Mart because she wanted to bring her husband a meal.
But
Which
and
when
that
well when we find out the sort of who the killer is and why, I thought that seemed kind of weird that she would show up to try to give her husband a meal, but we can get to it. Anyway, she's at this riot and she gets trampled, hit in the head with a shopping cart, and then her hair gets caught in the wheel of the shopping cart and she gets scalped a little bit. I
yeah,
didn't think that was enough to kill someone though.
yeah, it's because it's she's killed with like a shopping cart collision or something where they're running over her head. I don't know. It's
But her head doesn't like, it doesn't look like her skull was fractured. It looks like she just got hit and knocked out. And then someone yanked out a chunk of her hair and that killed her. There's more to her story, but we'll save it. Um, then there was another security guard that night who ran off. Like he's like, F this, I don't get paid enough. And then we see that the killer shows up at his house and stabs him in the stomach with like a turkey carver and then decapitates him.
and then
That
feeds.
scene, there are a lot of kills in this movie, and they do have a little more flair than the average, like, Friday the 13th movie. But I thought a cute part of that scene was that the security guard has a cat. Didn't you think it was weird that the security guard's like, I'm leaving for the Dominican Republic? He's
Yeah.
leaving like he's trying to escape a hitman or something.
Well, I mean, there have been other. There's a death before his, the waitress.
Oh, I
I'm
totally forgot about that. You're right. So there was a waitress who was at the riot. She was being rude and loud. The killer shows up to her place and he douses her head in water. And then what's that movie with the little boy and the tongue? A Christmas Story? He does that to her where he puts her face on like the freezer door. So she has to peel her skin off. And then he rams her with his car outside into a dumpster. And when the dumpster lid closes, it decapitates her or cuts her in half. That seems silly.
again, I don't think that force of that hit would have been strong enough to do that. But
Well,
yeah,
we have those kind of dumpsters at my job, and one time the lid fell on me, but it's not metal, it's like plastic, so it didn't obviously split me in half. But anyway,
slice clear through her waist.
then that server, there's like this hunky high school football player next to her from the rival school to Jessica's, who looks way too old to be in high school. The killer ends up finding him and like snapping his neck during a scene where like that football player is with a cheerleader and she's trying to seduce him by jumping on a trampoline without her panties on. I didn't understand how that was seductive.
But she leads him to the back of this closed off part of the gym, and there's just a tramp like for an act that she's doing. I really didn't
I didn't
understand.
understand that because he's also working and she makes it seem like, hey, come follow me for a quickie, but I'm gonna do like a trampoline performance for you first. That was so stupid. But the killer kills her because while she's jumping on the trampoline, he has his knife poking up, so she gets stabbed to death. Then one of Jessica's friends is this Russian girl whose dad like whisks her away, which actually made sense, which I'm going to get to because it seems like the town is not that worried about these killings because there's a Thanksgiving parade and everyone's just out there like, yay, isn't it a beautiful time of year?
And the store is gonna have a sale again.
Yeah, but the Russian girl's dad's like, come on, girl, I'm sending you to Florida, I think. But while she's at home packing, the killer shows up and those those things that you stab into a corn of cob to eat it. He stabs those in her ears like Q-tips. And then their house is being remodeled. So there's a huge table saw in the kitchen that's not covered. And it gets turned on and she gets like mangled with that. Then when we get to the parade, one of the drivers of like a float that has a boat with one of those spears in front, that boat rams into him and like pierces the driver in the head. That was pretty gruesome. Then Jessica, her dad, the owner of Price Mart, he is engaged to this like real estate agent who's meant to seem like not a nice lady. She wasn't
Kathleen.
vile enough for my taste, but she she ends up getting cooked in like the killer has this huge oven. Somehow he got into the place where he's doing the oven is huge. I don't know how that's there, but he cooks her.
Like Cook the Thief, the wife, the Cook the Thief, his wife and her lover style. Yeah.
Yes. Um, and then the one of the other boys, the most vile one, Evan. So he's kind of like the ringleader of Jessica's friend group, which who we need to talk about, or this friend group. He ends up getting that Thanksgiving, the final scene that's being live streamed with the killer and all their victims. Evan gets like his head smashed in with a meat tenderizer. This movie is pretty violent in a cartoonish way.
Yes.
So I didn't think it was too much for my taste. It's just, you know, it's cartoonish. You had said that it felt like a YA, like
It feels like a Y slap. It feels like something I would have read as a teenager by Christopher Pike, which you could. There are very violent horror novels for YA, the YA audience, and this feels exactly like that.
I did write down at a point that because the movie is like 100 minutes, it did clip along, but I was worried like, oh God, is the killer going to kill all the people we met? So thankfully, the killer doesn't finish off like the last three. But yeah, there are a lot of people killed in this movie. Okay, so Jessica and her friend group. So Jessica, the daughter of the Price Mart owner, she seems like a really sweet person who seems to be aware of like her position in life and what her dad's doing and capitalism and all, like she seems like a decent person. So I didn't quite understand why she had such a vapid friend group who she
Well,
doesn't
see,
seem to have a lot in common with.
right, like they're all into sports, which she doesn't seem to be interested in to any degree. She's played by Nell Verlaque, and she reminded me a lot of the lead white girl in the movie Ma with Octavia Spencer. Just kind of this,
Oh,
like a nice, a beautiful, but a little bland, you know.
I was getting Jessica Alba. She's beautiful.
I could see that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, her like the main kid in her group, Evan, I thought he was, yeah, not like just so annoying that I don't understand how she's friends with him. Then there's another kid named Scuba who looks like he could be a teacher at the school. He does not look like a teenager. One one ridiculous scene. Well, I didn't even mention. So the year prior when the initial riot happened, Jessica has a boyfriend named what's
Bobby,
Bobby, and then he disappears after the riot.
he's injured and it ruins his career as a student athlete.
Yeah, like I think a baseball player because now his pitching hand during the riot he got trampled. So when we find out who the killer is, it did. I will say that I didn't guess who the killer was until the end. But there are two major red herrings because the manager of the store, Mitch, is super disgruntled. We get news footage of him a year later, bad mouthing the store and the owners, and then his wife, Gina Gershon, died. So you would assume maybe it's him. Or it's Bobby, Jessica's boyfriend, because his baseball career is ruined and he went missing.
And there's a new deputy that's suddenly come to town that everybody thinks is
Yeah, and then there's a new sheriff deputy who shows up and he's weird. So there were three major red herrings because the killer is none of those three. So I kind of felt like, yes, the movie did keep me surprised until the end, but that's because it threw me all these like obvious curveballs. So then when we do find out, it wasn't that satisfying. It felt kind of like, oh, okay, you got me, gal, I guess.
Well, but I did note during it, I'm like, the sheriff is not doing a good job at all.
So then to say who the killer is the sheriff, Patrick Dempsey. And the reason for why he's doing this, I thought was a stretch. Because,
Oh,
like you
and a half.
mentioned, the opening of the film is the sheriff, who's a single man, shows up to Mitch and Gina's house for Thanksgiving. And it's very obvious immediately that he is fond of her. We find out that he was actually having an affair with her.
And
And
she's pregnant with his baby.
that she's pregnant with his baby.
Gershon is
So
pregnant.
Gina Gershon is pregnant with Patrick Dempsey's baby. So he's mad and he wants to kill everyone who was involved that night, which doesn't make sense because that crowd was like hundreds deep. And then you just pick like this friend group.
Well, and also, what was the point of slicing and dicing them and making them attend this little vicious, murderous Thanksgiving feast? I don't know what the point was for who to understand what
Yeah, like what is he proving?
to the world.
Because they're like I mean, I guess it's like a commentary on capitalism and mob mentality, but it's pretty weak. It's pretty weak.
Yeah.
Because if anything, it would have made more sense the following year because they are having the Black Friday sale again, that he shows up and kills all those people, like they all get trapped. So what I thought maybe could have been more fun is what I was expecting because of the way because the price mark, I think the movie looks fine. The special effects are cartoonish as far as the kills go. And then Price Mart itself, which we're told is like this major successful retail store, looks like Spirit Halloween. Like they just set it up in 2 weeks to be open for 1 month. Like it doesn't look, it's not even as nice as any Walmart, which is not good. So I was expecting that when we flash forward 1 year, that maybe the killer gets all these people trapped in the store and he's just plucking off people like it's a massacre. So it
Like
felt kind of random.
like Jigsaw would do.
Yes. Because then it's like, oh, you just picked the kids who got into the store early, one of whom is the owner's daughter. But then you also chose two people who were in the mob. And then like this security guard who ran away. I felt like the security guard didn't deserve to
No, he wasn't
get paid enough to deal with that.
So the screenplay was written by Jeff Rendell, who wrote the treatment for what this is based on, which was a short that was part of the Grindhouse film called Thanksgiving that Eli Roth had directed. And this is his first feature script that's been made. And you know, there's a lot better way to convey information to the audience. Like the security guard telling his cat he's going to the Dominican Republic. Like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
Well, speaking of that, I think one of the crunchiest moments is the sheriff is asking Jessica, like, if you know anything, you need to help me. Like, I know you're probably keeping something, but I really need to solve this. But really, he's the killer, so he wants to make sure that he doesn't get hemmed up. And what does Jessica divulge? Because we find out that mysteriously all the surveillance footage from Price Mart is missing for that night. So probably partially why the owner is not found responsible for all these deaths. But Jessica says, oh, well, we keep a backup of the footage at my dad's, like my dad's house on his computer, and it's backed up for 1 year.
Right. So
and then she just goes and very easily pulls it up and then starts printing screenshots. I thought that was ridiculous, like so poorly done.
And you didn't think of doing that before when
Right.
it was mysteriously got. It's only when your friends start getting murdered that you're like, let me do the right thing.
But to follow up with something that I did think was well done is Jessica is at school and the killer finds her there and attacks her. And she's able to escape, but partially because she's hiding in like the cosmetology lab. And she's hiding. You knew I would like that. I thought that was clever. She's hiding because they have like a table filled with mannequin heads, and she places herself kind of like as one of the mannequin heads. I did think that was interesting.
We used to have a bunch of those and we would pose with them in that fashion.
Yes, actually. Yeah, I have pictures of us doing that. I hope I can find them. Um, okay. My favorite character in the film was McCarty, the gun guy, played by Joe Delfin.
For sure.
I thought
Yeah,
he was funny and kind of had the energy I was hoping for.
he felt
He,
like very much like an Eli Roth touch as well. Yeah.
and he's this like adult man he throws party and sells alcohol and guns to teenagers. I thought that was funny, and I thought his performance was funny.
Yeah, he has his moments kind of have the energy I think the film could have used a lot more of.
Mhm.
Not going to have, probably very intelligent storytelling, but yeah, he has this party house where Scuba and Jessica go to get guns from him, and he's got all these passed out children in the upstairs. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, watch out for that boy. He's been here for 2 days. He had too much white zin.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of that scene, so Scuba, the 40-year-old high schooler, he goes to get a gun from McCarty. And we're told like he's never handled a gun before. But then when McCarty gives him the gun, he's handling it like he fully knows like how to use it. I thought that was weird.
Yeah, well, there's that whole thing with it is so obvious with everything it's doing, especially that cheap little locket that she has, that Jessica has with her mother. It's like you can get a better locket to remember your mom with. She's like, I miss my mom, and then she opens it. It says mom, and then they reference it more than once about how she shot a musket once and it almost didn't go well
Oh,
because
let's talk about that because I wrote that down. We hear it like I think 2 times that she tried to fire a musket, and then in the end, when she's able to defeat Patrick Dempsey, she for some reason chooses to inflate this large chicken with like
well, a turkey, I'm sure.
or a turkey, yeah, sorry, a turkey with what we see as like flammable gas. And then Patrick Dempsey is standing next to the turkey, this big inflatable turkey. And then we see her like struggling to fill this musket gun. And then she shoots the turkey and it explodes. And then we are led to believe that Patrick Dempsey is burned to death. But then, not unlike that one Halloween film where Michael Myers walks out dressed as a firefighter, we see firefighters walk out. And the way it's shot and the way Jessica's looking, we think that maybe Patrick Dempsey didn't die and maybe he walked out as a firefighter. And then the final scene of the film is Jessica in bed having a nightmare that Patrick Dempsey grabs her in her bedroom while he's on fire. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a sequel.
If it makes money, there will be a sequel, sure.
At the parade, I was confused. So we see a sheriff get shot. And I assumed it was, or a deputy, like a law enforcement person gets shot. And I thought it was that new deputy. But then in the end, we see that new deputy. But then we also see Patrick Dempsey like on the floor bloody. But then it seems like he's not injured, like he set that up. And then he explains like, oh, because the sheriff is trying to tell Jessica Bobby's the killer. And then he says, oh, Bobby got me. I was very confused. Did you understand what happened?
When she gets the sheriff's gun because she escapes the Thanksgiving Day massacre meal and then finds Dempsey on the ground outside of that warehouse, takes his gun, and he's bloody, passed out. And then when he reveals all to her, I think he mentioned that he had Bobby in the back of his truck and he beamed him on the head.
But then if he's in the back of the truck, how did he, because when Jessica finds Patrick Dempsey, he's laid out next to his cop car with the door open.
That was confusing. That's the story I invented in my head to explain that, but I'm not.
Yeah, I thought that whole thing was crunchy. And then the way we find out, well, because I didn't guess who the killer was. The reason we know who the killer is because Jessica was at that live stream dinner, but then she's able to escape. And oh, also Scuba gets stabbed in the shoulder with an axe, but then the killer leaves. So I'm assuming Scuba didn't die, The dad doesn't die. He's able to escape. One of Jessica's other friends, who has nothing to do but be pretty, she also wasn't killed. But when Jessica's escaping, she's running through a field and there are these bushes that have like thorns on them. So when she gets rescued by Patrick Dempsey and she's in the police station, she's picking the thorns off of her pants. And earlier in the film, Patrick Dempsey had told her, you need to watch out for the little details. That's how most people get caught. So as Patrick Dempsey leaves her to go do something, when he comes back, number one, she's able to grab Bobby's phone that was bagged for evidence. And then she notices on Patrick Dempsey's pants that he has those same thorns. And that's when I realized, like, oh, he is the killer. He was the one chasing her. And then stupidly, he explains everything he did. And then we find out that Jessica was live streaming it. So now the world knows that he did it. And that's when everything goes downhill for him.
Now, there's a good
that was silly.
Silly, but I did like her line about, she's like, I never got to tell you what I was thankful for. And she said, the service in here.
Yeah, that was a funny line. Also, Patrick Dempsey has a line when we find out he's the killer. He goes, this year there will be no leftovers.
Is the tagline for it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good one. That's all I have. I could see people liking this, so I had to pay to see this movie because we didn't make the screening. So I was in a theater with a bunch of people who seemed to be like not old enough to rent a car, and they were living. Like everyone was shouting at the screen and laughing. So I could see people liking it. And again, I think if I compare it to like any other basic slasher movie, this one did feel a little more inventive and fresh and funny. But like you said, I think it really could have done something smart with the whole Black Friday capitalism mob mentality thing.
It could have been great, because if you really do pick it apart, it is very formulaic, and he's just inserting his own kind of, hyper violent torture porn that he is good at. I mean, the kills are interesting and well done for the most part. But even how like this, because we're going to have a Christmas film coming out just like this too, where this horrible thing happens on the holiday and then we return to it a year later for revenge, which is John Woo's Silent Night, which is about to come out. It has the same kind of arc. I don't know. There were just so many. It could have been good, is how I feel.
Well, again, the opening scene before the title card comes, I thought was such a good start. But then after that, it just becomes your average slasher film.
It is, and it's like, I was excited to see Gina Gershon in this, and then she dies before the opening credits rolls.
I know. What would you do? Oh, go ahead.
Talk about how the special effects in her scene where her hair is being pulled off felt very like late 70s, early 80s Lucio Fulci kind of film.
But so did like the waitress getting split in half. Like her innards look like that sausage that's like the long rope. Like it didn't look like, I've seen the inside of a body and that's not what it looks like. But it was still fun enough. What would you give Thanksgiving?
I'm giving it 2
out of 5. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Anything else? All right. Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.